They always come back with an apology. But it's not because they feel remorse. It's because they feel power slipping through their fingers. They don't miss you. They miss control. They miss how easily you used to forgive, how quickly you used to respond, how you used to twist your own logic just to keep the peace. So when they apologize, it isn't about healing. It's about resetting the cycle. It's a tactic, a performance, a carefully rehearsed script designed to pull you back into the same pain you just escaped. They know the exact tone to use. They know when to look sad. They know how to sprinkle in just enough vulnerability to make you second-guess your strength. Because if they can get you to feel sorry for them, they've already won. It's not regret. It's strategy. It's manipulation wearing the mask of change. And they'll say all the right things. I didn't mean to hurt you. I've been doing a lot of thinking. You were right all along. But watch their actions. Watch what happens the moment you accept the apology. The moment you open the door, they go back to exactly who they were. Because the apology wasn't a doorway to growth. It was a leash, a hook, a rope around your hope. They don't want forgiveness, they want access. Access to your heart, to your peace, to your stability, to everything they lost when you chose yourself. Because when you left, you didn't just walk away from a relationship. You walked away from their supply, their mirror, their emotional punching bag, and now they're scrambling. Not because they want to be better, but because they want their toy back. They want their audience back. They want their power back. So they come with tears, with texts, with long paragraphs that sound nothing like them, because they probably copied it from a blog or a quote, and they hope you'll bite. They hope your empathy will override your instincts, because you've done it before. Because you've always chosen love over logic, but not this time. This time you see it for what it is. It's not healing, it's hunting, it's not growth, it's grooming. And the moment they feel safe again, they'll punish you for ever making them feel uncertain. Because narcissists don't forgive, they store ammo, they wait, they watch, and they strike when you're most open. When you've relaxed again, when you've let the guard down, that's when the mask drops. That's when the cycle resets. That's when the apology becomes a weapon. Because now they get to say, I said I was sorry. What more do you want? Now they get to shift the blame. Now they get to rewrite the narrative. Now they get to make you feel guilty for not healing fast enough. And that guilt becomes a leash all over again, a loop, a trap. But you're not falling for it, not this time, because you've seen the cycle too many times to pretend it's new. You've heard the same words, felt the same gut feelings, watched the same patterns unfold. And now your body doesn't lie anymore. Now your nervous system tells the truth before your mind can explain it away. The apology isn't real. It's bait. It's emotional currency designed to buy back your silence. But you're done being bought. You're done selling yourself for moments of fake peace. You're done believing pain is a sign of passion. Because real love doesn't make you question your sanity. It doesn't require you to forget every wound just to maintain the illusion of closeness. Real love doesn't apologize just to reset abuse. It transforms. It listens. It changes. And you haven't seen change. You've seen cycles. You've seen patterns. You've seen promises wrapped in panic. They're not sorry. They're scared. Scared that you're healing. Scared that you're speaking up. Scared that they're losing the one person who kept forgiving the unforgivable. But that's not your problem anymore. Their fear is not your responsibility. Their instability is not your job to soothe. You are not their rehab center. You are not their emotional hostage. You are not required to respond to pain with pity. You don't owe anyone your peace just because they suddenly miss your presence. They had your love. They had your loyalty. They had access to the most forgiving version of you, and they used it. They weaponized it. They expected it to last forever. But even the most open heart learns, even the kindest soul reaches a limit, and you've reached yours. You can hear the apology and still walk away. You can acknowledge the words and not absorb them. You can feel the pull and still say no. Because boundaries aren't about keeping people out. They're about keeping you in, keeping you safe, keeping you whole, keeping you from turning into someone you don't recognize just to make someone else feel comfortable. So when they come back, and they will, remember this. Remember that real change takes time. It takes consistency. It takes accountability. And nothing about their behavior has ever been consistent except the chaos. They don't miss you. They miss control. They don't feel sorry. They feel entitled. They don't want to heal. They want to reset. But you're done resetting. You're done forgetting. You're done starting over just to end up in the same place. This is your line. This is your break. This is the moment you finally choose yourself and don't look back. Because their apology is just another manipulation. They call it closure. You call it confusion. Because every time they apologize, it opens another wound. Not because you want them back, but because you wanted it to mean something. You wanted the pain to be acknowledged. You wanted the truth to finally rise above the gaslighting. But their apology isn't about giving you truth. It's about controlling the ending. Because if they can leave you uncertain, they still have access. If they can make you question your decision, they still have power. It's not about the words. It's about the impact. They don't care how much they broke you. They care how you reflect on them when you speak to others. They care about the image, not the damage. So they say just enough to sound deep, just enough to disarm you, just enough to reopen the door they never deserved to walk through again. And if you let them in, it starts over. The flattery, the promises, the new mask, and it all feels real again. Until it doesn't. Because nothing underneath has changed. There's no accountability, no empathy, no remorse, only the need to reclaim what they once controlled. And when they feel like they've got you back, the devaluation resumes. They pull away again, they provoke again, they push your buttons again. And you wonder how it happened so fast. But it didn't happen fast. It never ended. The apology was just the intermission, the calm before the next round of chaos. You think maybe you were wrong? Maybe they've evolved? Maybe the pain was exaggerated in your mind? But that doubt isn't real. It was planted because they specialize in confusion, in subtle attacks, in emotional bait and switch. One day they're the love of your life. The next, they can't remember what made you cry. One week, they beg you to stay. The next, they ghost you until you break down. It's not love, it's control. Control dressed in borrowed empathy. Control dressed in crisis. Control disguised as healing. They say they're working on themselves, but all they've really done is learn new language. Words like trigger, accountability, growth. But none of those words come with action. None of them come with real change. They just use them to sound evolved, to confuse you into thinking they've done the work. But people who do the work don't beg for second chances. They respect your space. They respect your no. They don't chase you with guilt. They don't pressure you with pity. They don't weaponize healing to get you to stay, because real healing isn't performative. It doesn't need an audience, and it doesn't demand access to the person it hurt. They're not apologizing to heal you. They're apologizing to reset you, to take you back to the version of yourself that didn't question them, that didn't say no, that didn't set boundaries. And the moment you start protecting yourself, they call you cold. They say you've changed. They say you're the problem now. Because in their world, your pain was never real. Only their perception mattered. Only their narrative had value. And your ability to forgive? It was their favorite weapon, because they knew how far you'd go to keep peace, how much you'd bend to avoid guilt, how long you'd wait for them to become the person they pretended to be. But not anymore. Now you know that words are cheap. Now you know that remorse isn't something spoken, it's lived. Now you know that real apologies don't come with expectations. They come with space. They come with changed behavior. They come with silence, not pressure. But they can't be silent, because silence means they've lost you. So they perform. They confess. They write long letters. They play victim. Not because they've changed, but because you have. You're no longer impressed by tears. You're no longer moved by recycled speeches. You're no longer available for emotional ping pong. You've stepped out of the game. And that's why they panic. Not because they miss your heart, but because they miss their reflection in it. You were the mirror. You were the fuel. You were the stage. And now the lights are off, the show is over, and they're left with themselves. A place they've never learned to live in. They didn't apologize to make things right. They apologized to keep things going, because if they can keep the cycle spinning, They can keep control, not over your body, but over your mind. That's the real prize. Your doubt, your hesitation, your self-betrayal. Because when you stop trusting yourself, you start trusting them. And that's their plan, to keep you confused enough to stay, to keep you grateful for crumbs, to keep you apologizing for their explosions. And every time you forgave, they learned they didn't need to change. They just needed to stall. Say something sad, say something deep, maybe even cry. They practiced those moments. They rehearsed the right mix of words and silence, not to earn your trust, to disarm it. Because once they have your empathy, they own your mind. You second-guess everything. You walk on eggshells even during apologies. You feel guilt for even feeling pain. You think you're dramatic. You think you're too sensitive, but you're not. You're finally waking up, and that terrifies them because they knew this day might come. The day their words stop working. The day your heart stops defending them. The day your silence turns into distance. So now they panic. Now they talk about therapy. Now they mention trauma. Now they claim self-awareness. But awareness isn't healing. It's not accountability. It's not transformation. It's just knowledge without action. And knowledge without action is manipulation, because they still want what they always wanted: access without responsibility, control without commitment, loyalty without effort, love without love. They want to be your entire world while making you feel like a burden in theirs. And that's not love. That's ego. That's entitlement. That's exploitation. And you're not a resource. You're not their fixer. You're not their cure. You're a human being who deserves more than being forgiven for being mistreated. You deserve peace without conditions, joy without guilt, connection without games. But they'll never give you that because it requires presence, consistency, vulnerability. And narcissists can't sit in the fire of their own discomfort. They can't hold your hand and take accountability. They need to win. They need to be right. They need to be the center, even when they're wrong, especially when they're wrong. So their apology will always circle back to you, to how you misunderstood, how you overreacted, how you didn't give them enough time, how you triggered them, how they've changed and you haven't. But that's not truth. That's deflection. That's distortion. That's performance. Because deep down, they know they lost something rare. And instead of healing, they perform. Instead of apologizing with action, they manipulate with words. And the scariest part, it works if you're not ready. It works if you still believe it can be different. It works if you still crave the version of them they showed you at the start. But you're done chasing that ghost. That version wasn't real. It was bait, a costume, a temporary character they wore to gain your loyalty. And now it's gone. Now you see the real person, the one who avoids responsibility, the one who punishes honesty, the one who plays victim while wounding others. And now you get to choose something different. You get to choose silence over performance, distance over confusion, peace over chaos. You get to say no without explanation. You get to walk away without guilt. You get to rebuild without looking back. Because the apology wasn't for you. It was for control. It was a tool, a distraction, a trap. But you're not stepping in it. Not this time. Not ever again. You wanted the apology to mean something. You wanted it to hold weight. You wanted it to finally end the confusion. But all it did was restart the war in your mind. Because every time they say sorry, it doesn't bring peace, it brings pressure. Pressure to forgive, pressure to respond, pressure to reopen a door you closed to survive. And that's not healing, that's emotional blackmail. They don't want resolution. They want restoration of their power. They want to reset the dynamic where they lead and you follow, where they hurt and you explain, where they disappear and you wait. But you're no longer waiting. You're no longer hoping. You're no longer letting someone else's empty words dictate your future. They never changed. You just stopped lying to yourself about who they are. They never grew. You just stopped shrinking. They never apologized from truth. They apologized to trigger your compassion, because that's what always worked before. But now you're unmoved. Now you're quiet. Now you're grounded. And silence is the loudest answer you can give to a manipulator, because they don't know what to do with a person who doesn't bite the bait. They panic, they scramble, they spiral, and they project. They say you're cold now. They say you've changed. They say you never cared. But deep down, they know. You cared more than anyone ever did. You showed up when no one else would. You stayed when you should have walked. You forgave what broke you. You loved what drained you. And still, it was never enough. Because they didn't want love. They wanted control. And once they lose it, they panic. That's what their apology really is. A panic move. A way to test if you still belong to them emotionally. To see if you'll break your own boundaries for their comfort. But now you don't. Now you've learned. Now you understand that love without safety is abuse. That loyalty without accountability is slavery. That relationships without growth are prisons. And you refuse to be caged ever again. You are no longer someone who tolerates pain disguised as passion. You are no longer someone who accepts crumbs and calls it nourishment. You are no longer someone who abandons yourself just to keep another person calm. The apology was never for your healing. It was for their ego. It was a manipulation, sweetened, rehearsed, and timed. But you're no longer on their clock. You're on your own time now. A time where healing is sacred, where boundaries are non-negotiable, where your worth is not up for discussion, and your peace is not for sale. So let them say sorry. Let them perform. Let them write novels in your inbox. You don't owe a reply. You don't owe a second chance. You don't owe your pain another round of suffering. You already survived them. You already rebuilt from the ruin they left behind. Why go back? Why reopen the wound just to see if the knife feels different this time? It won't. It never does. It only cuts deeper. But you're no longer made of wounds. You're made of lessons now. And your silence is your freedom. Your distance is your power. Your refusal is your healing. Because the narcissist's apology is just another manipulation. And now, you're finally free from it.